Hey guys, and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking about how you can fix your back pain from home. Should be a nice succinct live stream today, so thanks for joining us. I'm going to go through how you guys can recognize the problem, understand that cutting out some of the bad things is really important, and then a suitable and sensible follow-up plan to actually deal with it from home that you can follow. So we'll talk about that, and at the end, as always, we'll get into the question and answer. So if you've got any questions, then Lara's behind the camera on the other computer, and she'll be able to read those questions out at the end. So if you've got any, post them in, and we'll go through that at the end. We've got a nice drawing on the whiteboard behind me as well, so I'll go through that during today's live stream, and hopefully it'll be really helpful, because these are just mistakes that people make over and over again. I think if you get to grips with the understanding of this, then you'll do very well and be able to deal with your back pain effectively. So firstly, this is what we're going to be talking about: recognizing the problem first and foremost, and then I'll get into cutting out the bad. There's going to be two mistakes that you guys, or the most common mistakes, and I'll use the board behind me to explain those. And if you can just cut these out first and foremost, you're going to do a lot better. One of the big things with a lot of patients is just when they start cutting out the bad stuff, you start doing better immediately, and then you add in some of the good stuff, and you're going to do a lot better very quickly, and it becomes something that really lasts. So that's really important. Now, the first thing we want to do is understand what is actually going to be causing your back pain, and to understand that, we need to understand what the back does and how it fails. So the main role of your lower back here is to resist the load of gravity. So it deals with compressive loading on a day in, day out basis, and normally it does that very well. Currently, we've got lockdown on, so there's a lot of people that are doing things that are not very good for their backs, and they're weight bearing and load bearing poorly, and maybe putting in place some practices that are actually doing substantial long-term or just bad for the back. I don't want to say long-term damage, because that's not technically true, but they're not very good habits to get into, and they will lead to challenges further on down the line. So we need to be mindful of that. Then spine should have a nice smooth curve in it. This is called lordosis. Sometimes patients, when they come in to see us at the clinic, they get given, they tell us they've been given diagnosis of having lordosis before. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you've been diagnosed with lordosis, then that's like being diagnosed with two legs. It's a completely useless diagnosis. It's not saying anything other than the fact that you have a curve in your lower back, which you should do. There are other variations of that word, such as hypo and hyper, which are actually useful. If they've been substantiated and quantified, then you can understand how to make your treatment even more specific. But we should have a lordosis, a nice smooth curve that allows it to absorb shock effectively. When we reduce that curve, we start to get problems. And in the clinic, because we work so closely with imaging, we do see from experience that a lot of people that have recurrent back pain that's not resolving, it's down to there's a reduction in the curve occurring at the same time, which adds an unnecessary stress and challenge to that back, so it makes it more difficult to recover. Now, if we already know that we've got a reduced curve, and that is likely to be a component of your back pain, what's the number one exercise you're going to be doing to deal with back pain? It's going to be forward bending. Well, that makes the curve even more flat and creates problems, so we'll get to that in due course. So understanding that your spine should have a smooth curve through it, it's there to weight bear, is really important. When it fails, it's either a one-off load, such as an accident that happens, or it's more likely repetitive stress and strain on those discs and the load-bearing structures in your spine that start to fail. So, for example, you can see this is a side profile of the spine here for you, and as we're constantly bending forwards, we're stressing out the ligaments in the back here, where my thumb is, which is green. You can probably barely see it here. Those maintain that nice lordosis, so you're stretching those out. We're also putting compression through the front of the disc, and we're stretching the back of the disc as well in here, which is going to create repetitive stress and strain on the ligaments. And long term, if that's done repetitively, it's going to lead to a degree of instability there as well, and instability breeds vulnerability, especially when we've got so many joints that need to work in an interconnected way to allow them to effectively weight bear and effectively allow us to move around on a daily basis. So a state of balance through here is so important. If you're sat slouched all day, putting a lot of stretch through these ligaments down here or down here at the L4-5 or 5S1 down the bottom, then you're going to be creating instability in that region in a repetitive manner, which creates almost a weak link in the chain, which leads to further challenges in the rehab. So that's pretty much understanding what the problem is with back pain. Now, cutting out the bad, the next two bits I'm going to cover, is so important, and if you can do this effectively, it's going to be really helpful. If you've had back pain for a long period of time, then it will require a bit of consistency following the principles that I'll get to at the end of this. But if you can cut out the bad, that's going to be really to your favor. So first and foremost, bad is going to be heating. That's really, really important. People put heat on this area. You would never put heat on a sprained ankle because it's inflamed. And when that ankle inflames, you see how much it enlarges under a relatively minor injury. Now, this example here isn't quite to scale, but you can see the nerves come out of a finite bony canal, which is outlined here. This orange bit here is the nerve, and we've got the space behind the disc, the exit foramina, and that's the area where inflammation builds up. So if we use heat to help the muscles which are back here, they're going to relax off, but you're going to make the inflammation build up in here because you're shunting loads of circulation into this area, and that makes the inflammation worse. It's not helpful. And the biggest problem with icing and heating is there's a lot of controversial, well, not controversial, but contradictory research and evidence around this. But we in the clinic deal with back pain day in, day out. It works if you do it this way. So follow the instructions, and if you've already been using heat and it's not been working, cut it out. That's a very common sense approach, and use the ice instead as we instruct later on. So that's really, really, really important principle. The muscles like heat. It makes the inflammation down here a lot worse. And I'd also add put this proposition to you as well, watching this, if you're thinking, well, what are you on about? Heat feels nice. Heat feels nice anyway. Everyone likes to jump in a warm shower. It feels nice with the warmth on your back, whether or not you've got back pain. And it's very difficult to understand whether it's just the fact that it feels nice anyway, that you're attributing that to it feeling nice on your back, or is it actually helping the back? And I'd put it to you that it's really not. Change this up and it'll work a lot better for you, especially when you've got a bit of consistency, because people time and time again say, oh, the heat feels really nice while I do it, but my back keeps on flaring up day in, day out, or it feels nice when I have my warm bath, but an hour afterwards I'm sore again. That's because the inflammation's shunting, the heat is shunting stuff to this area, creating more inflammation, and then you're pressing on that nerve a little bit later on as it's not drained properly, and then you have your pain back and you go back and do some more heating with a hot water bottle and it makes it worse again. The next one kind of relates into this, about this little space here, is the forward bending. Now, a lot of the exercises include nerve flossing. We were watching something on the NHS website the other day. I was absolutely horrified that they'd give patients this stretches. It's really, really shocking. And this is partially why we created the Back in Shape membership. You can access this basic information for free by joining any time, and it'll always be free for people to join the basic information, because you need better advice than what was given there. So in this video, this lady was pretty much in a fetal position on her back, and she said, oh, if you tuck your chin down even more, and it's not her fault, she's just doing the video, if you tuck your chin down even more, really get a stretch through here. And I was just like, and Lara pointed out to me, and it was absolutely astounding. It's really bad, and a lot of people do have disc involvement with their lower back problem, so it just makes no sense whatsoever. Forward bending basically increases the size of this space. So if we've got inflammation here, let me just show you guys. Take out the red pen. If we've got inflammation in here, invariably it's the pressure that builds up in this space that starts to irritate the nerve. So when we bend forwards a lot, we increase the margin, we increase the size of that hole, which is why it feels nice, which is generally why they recommend it, because they're approaching the problem from a different philosophical standpoint than what we do in the clinic, which is why these exercises will feel lovely while you're doing them, but it really does not help the underlying problem at all. Because if we then imagine we have a bit of tearing to the disc because you've been stretching it all the time and it's just given way, you've constantly been bending forwards like I showed you, constantly been bending forwards like this, it's stressing out this poor disc and it's just given up. You pull it long enough, it'll just give up and it starts to become torn. Maybe it was that one bend down, like I'm just doing to put that spine there, but maybe it was that one bend down to put your socks on, or you were just doing that bit of watering in the garden and that was the last bit that caused it to tear here. And you cannot, and this is the silliness about these things, you cannot tear that without having some degree of tissue damage over here. So the interspinous ligaments have also been torn in some way because they failed to deal with that stretch that went through them under load, and that's created inflammation in and around this area here. So that's creating the inflammation, it's building up, so you think bend forwards to open out the space, but that's treating the symptoms, that's not treating the problem, and that's why things get worse. Because as you bend forwards and open out this gap here, you're basically ripping that wound open even further. So, and the problem with ligaments, which is primarily the structures that you've injured in your back down here, is that they have a very poor blood and nerve supply. So you don't get an instantaneous feeling of, ow, this hurts, generally. Until a little bit later that it builds back up and it reacts. That's why a lot of times when people do have back pain, it's they've woken up in the morning with it, and it was what they did yesterday that actually created the injury in the first instance. It's just had that time to now build up, and then boom, you can't get out of bed. So these are torn, and then you're bending forwards aggressively to just rip them open even more and create even more tissue damage. So when things do eventually become chronic enough for it to become low-grade pain instead of severe I can't move pain, you now have an instability, a wobbly joint down here that doesn't move properly, and that is a real trouble to deal with because it can go at any point because it's a vulnerable weak link in the chain. And as you can see on the spine, there's lots and lots of joints there that all need to work together, and if we've repetitively made this complex worse, then you're really going to struggle. So what should we do instead? We should work on treating these problems directly rather than making them worse with forward bending exercises. And a combination of forward bending and heat will allow you to go further forward, and then you're in a very difficult position. I've seen people time and time again like this. Now this hole is bigger because the first person's cranked over forwards and they're using heat, and the hole is much larger because the spine has now moved to a chronic flexion position and the person can't stand up straight, and these holes are filled up with inflammation. So even if they try and marginally straighten up to maybe halfway up, the pain is there because they close this hole and squeeze on this area which has got way too much inflammation with it because it's been enlarged, and now the person can't stand up, even though standing up straight actually puts them in a better mechanical position for the problem because they stop stressing out these two wounds. So I know that's going into quite a bit of detail on the problem with flexion, but it's a problem that so many people find. And when we get patients or people that join the membership site and start doing some of these exercises that we recommend, they realize how counterintuitive or contrary to what they've been told before the exercises are, but actually they start to really help very quickly. So I would really encourage you to pay attention to this. If you can just cut out the heat and the forward bending for the reasons I've explained today, you will do very well. Now, what do we do with regards to a sensible plan to fix your back pain from home? Stop those things first and foremost and understand the problem, because if you don't, you're not going to get better. But then exercises. What are our first goals, our first aid, so to speak? And this is, again, it's all free to join in the membership area for Back in Shape. You can join that. There'll be a link underneath here after we've finished this video, so you can look at that. There's other stuff there that can help you in the future, but the main message is free for everybody and always will be. First, you want to re-engage that core. If you've got a chronic back problem, this doesn't mean sit-ups. It means learning to re-engage the core set that provides stability around your spine, around this section here. And those are some simplistic core exercises that you just learn to re-engage those muscles, especially if you've had chronic pain or been inactive over the years and not done as much physical exercise as you perhaps should have. And you know, if this is you, that's going to teach you to re-engage that. And sometimes we have patients, they're the simplest exercises, but sometimes patients really struggle with these, and it takes them a week or two to get to grips with just actually learning to re-engage these muscles again because they haven't used them in so long. The next one is working on the flexibility. Now, some of these stretches might seem similar. So for example, a hamstring stretch, we want to make sure the hips are nice and mobile so that they don't need to go that far back, but they can go through a full range of motion here without actually causing the lower back to kick in when we're moving. So we want to make those hips more flexible by doing hamstring stretching, hip flexor stretching, glute stretching, etc. And there are specific ways to do this with specific training points that we cover in those videos. So that is the second principle, core, and then flexibility in the hips, not the back. And then finally is that disc decompression stretch, which is where we unload the discs and we actually take pressure off them in a gentle and sensible and safe way so that you can allow those discs a little bit of time to rehydrate and recover effectively, get the nutrients that they need, and also allow those muscles to unload. Because as we reorientate, put the curve back into the lumbar spine with a bit of that stretch on our lumbar disc stretch, you actually take pressure off these discs, but also help these bits close up nicely, and then they can start to knit together again. You can see this process in action in your body if you've got a surface wound. You can see the cut, and it starts to contract around the wound to close up, and you're just instilling and reinforcing and helping that process take place by doing the lumbar disc stretch, whilst also it's actually really, really relieving. I will make a note that for a lot of people with chronic back pain, it's actually a little bit difficult for the first couple of days to actually do this exercise, but if you persevere, after a week or so, normally less than that, but after a week or so, you will find that the exercise is so relieving when done correctly. It really will help you, and it's so simple. Don't get stuck on just doing those exercises, because those are relief-based exercises. You then need to move on to strengthening, and that needs to be done in a sensible way, but we can cover that in another video. So just to recap and round it all up, recognize the problem, that's a compressive load, cut out the forward bending and the heat, and then follow a sensible progress or sensible program to re-engage your core muscles in a safe way, to keep good hip flexibility in a sensible way, and to take some pressure off those discs in the lower back through that lumbar disc stretch that we talk about in the membership site. Now, if you've got any questions, now's your time, and shoot them straight over.
Great, we've got a couple of questions. So first of all, Mandy has asked, it would be very useful to know how one should bend correctly at some point, please.
That really comes down to the hip hinge. What I'll do is we'll put that down on a video topic, because that requires a little bit more explanation. But essentially the bending should come from the hip joint primarily while you've got back pain. In the future, yes, we are allowed to bend badly from time to time, but you need to be very sensible with how you do it when you've got a back problem. If you're vulnerable, you do not want to be bending in any sort of bad way. The body is remarkably resilient once it's been rehabilitated, but if you've got back pain, we need to bend properly, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in one dedicated video for you guys. But in short, bend from the hips.
Okay, awesome. Maureen has asked, she said, I've got a scoliosis, a spondylosis and a bulging disc.
Okay.
And she's been in pain for over a year, and she's been doing the exercises recommended. Am I doing the right thing? I'm 78 years old.
So with that, if you've had those sorts of diagnoses for a very long period of time, it's going to be that it takes time to undo years and years of stress and strain on that spine. If we've got spondylosis, there's probably a degree of arthritic change occurring there. We've got the disc issues, and we've got the left to right imbalances. You may actually find it beneficial to have a look at the YouTube, the live we did the other day on scoliosis, and add in or make the adaptation with that neck and lower back towel exercise. That'll be really helpful for you. If it's a bit difficult for you to get onto the floor, then doing it on the bed is a acceptable segue into doing it on the floor, because on the floor is always better. But it's all about time scales. These tips work really, really well, but if you do have a longer standing problem, there needs to be a bit more consistency over time, or a bit of consistency before you get as much relief as you could get, or as you will get. And also I would really encourage you to work on the core muscles and be once you're at a manageable point, you can start to move on to the phase 2 sort of exercises that we talk about. Really work hard on those, because those will provide you with the stability to protect your scoliosis for the long term from worsening, and that's really, really important. But you will have the ability within you to really strengthen that area up and take control of the situation. It's just going to take a little bit longer, because you've got a few more things than the average person working against you.
Okay. All right, so Ollie has asked, is it good to do an exercise for strengthening the muscles around the hips, like the glutes? And when is the best time to take painkillers?
Okay, so the first one is strengthening up the glute muscles, etc. 100% we need to do those sorts of exercises. But if you're talking about the first steps of fixing your lower back pain from home, those we want to push those back a little bit, and that's more what we break things down into phase 1 and phase 2 really. Phase 1 is that first 0 to 14 days, and that's when you're in crisis, you can't do anything. And you need to go through some of these first aid type exercises to take the pressure off the spine. But once you're able to start moving around properly again, yes, we want to get into strengthening, because strengthening is how we compensate for the vulnerabilities that have been in our spine, especially if we're dealing with a recurrent injury or something that's long standing. Remember, even if it's just been there for a few days, if this is an issue that you have every couple of months or every 6 months or once a year, then there is something more detailed going on. You're just having a flare-up of a chronic issue, and dealing with it needs to be considered as a chronic problem rather than just an acute flare-up, because there are probably going to be imbalances and issues that are there in the background, which is why it keeps flaring up. So as soon as you can start moving reasonably well in and around the house, you want to be getting on with some of those strengthening exercises like the marching bridges, etc., that we talk about in phase 2, because those will be what protects you in the short to medium term while your body's going through the healing process, and also protects you from future re-injury. It's very, very important that you strengthen those things up. What was the second part of that question?
Best time to take painkillers.
Best time to take painkillers. So you'll see this is one of the basic 3 units about our approach on painkillers, but in short, take them sparingly. Sleeping is so important. We need to sleep well, because sleeping is when we recover. If you're struggling with sleep, then by all means you can take painkillers before bed, because you're not going to do any damage in bed. Objectively speaking, this is a load-bearing structure. It's off load-bearing when you're awake. When you're in bed. So you're not going to really do any damage. I'd be very, very cautious about taking painkillers during the day to carry on. So if you're, an example of this might be, I really like running, so I'll just pop a few painkillers and then go for a run. That's an obscene example, but you get the point. Your back is telling you that there are problems there. Sometimes it's telling you misinformation, but generally speaking, you need to have a certain awareness of things that are making the back worse. So if you're pushing it, carrying things, hoovering, doing the dishes, all of those things will be exerting pressure directly on that injury, and therefore you want to be aware of that. So the use of painkillers, I would say, sparingly. Do the exercises that we've discussed, do them consistently for a couple of days, and you probably will find that you don't need to use them as much.
Okay, great. Karen has asked, when you wake up with lower back pain, what should you do? So first thing to make yourself feel better.
So I'd say these exercises first and foremost, but actually a really good one, if you're a back sleeper or you wake up on your back, the first one is a little wiggle, and that's literally like a shimmy left and right. Okay, not a twisting. Don't rock your legs left and right. You get told to do that again. It's not helpful. A little shimmy, and that just helps get this area moving. And you might want to do that for a minute or two, and slowly you go wider to the left and to the right. You can even put your hands on your waist and just help you just gently go left and right, then roll on your side, pop yourself up. That might make things a little bit easier getting up first foremost in the morning. And the second part is a morning routine. What are you doing immediately? Maybe jumping on the floor might not be the best. You might find the first thing to do, if you're going to do your routine, maybe you do the towel on the bed rather than on the floor. Also, don't go and have a shave. Wash your feet first thing in the morning. Give yourself 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes being upright and walking around the house to allow your body to equalize and allow things to calm down a little bit before you go in and brush your teeth and those sorts of things, because that forward bending motion, you're a little bit vulnerable just because of a number of things that we won't get into today first thing in the morning. So please try and keep upright, do the shimmy or the wiggle, and potentially get into your exercises if you can first thing in the morning.
Okay, Joe's asked, if I do a lot of yoga with forward bending, am I a back problem waiting to happen?
So I think I'm talking about yoga later this week on Friday, so definitely tune in for that one. If you've got a back problem, the forward folding exercises in yoga is a great way to make it a lot worse. Objectively speaking, I would really be steering clear of those for the time being. We want to be specific and purpose driven with our exercises. Sometimes yoga is the main purpose of yoga seems to be, and this is just a generalization, but sometimes the purpose of yoga is to be good at yoga rather than to improve on certain restrictions and limitations that we have. And therefore it's not as purpose driven as it otherwise could be. Yoga can be fantastic as a tool, but it needs to be purpose driven to you rather than just doing generic routines.
Okay.
And the forward fold's not ideal.
Awesome. I think that is everything for today.
Awesome. I hope you guys found this live stream quite interesting today. And if you found it useful me drawing that sort of stuff on the whiteboard, then please do let me know, because we want to make these as useful as possible for you guys. And if seeing it drawn out on the screen behind me or on the whiteboard is actually a much easier way for you guys to digest it, then please do let us know in the comments below. If you're watching this after the fact, you've got any questions about how to fix your back from home that are a bit more specific, or we haven't covered, or clarification points, then please do put those in the comments below and we'll be sure to answer those. We regularly have quite a few actually YouTube comments that I've got to answer each day, so we'll go through those. We do answer them, and thank you for submitting them as well. And remember, if you do find these videos helpful, please share them, and consider subscribing as well if you're watching this on YouTube. We put these out every weekday for you guys. They're there to help people, especially right now when people can't get the support they need from a point of view of their back during lockdown. So please do share it, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow with another live stream. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.